Okay, we're working with something referred to as Venetian Mode painting, and this is a means of working that was employed by Renaissance painters such as Da Vinci, Michelangelo, and it involves a black and white or monochromatic underpainting, and then glazing over the top of that. This will all become much clearer to you as we go along here in this process. This is our source material, working from a photograph, black and white photograph initially, of 3 pieces of fruit on some drapery here. We may do a little simplifying, especially of the drapery, as we go along with this, but this is our source. The first few moves that we make with this source material, I think it makes sense to identify with an ellipse, the face of these apples. Apples aren't, completely round, and they flatten out a bit on their face where the stem goes in. So, as an ellipse here, an ellipse here, an ellipse here. A good thing to keep in mind here. Another helpful idea would be to use an axis line. And the axis line would be just an imaginary line where these 2 pieces of fruit would sit in the format. So an axis line would run underneath that one and underneath that one. And you can see that it's kind of at a pretty steep angle here. That makes a lot of sense for me in terms of just laying out the composition. So your axis line, and you can draw more lightly than I'm going to draw with this, but your axis line is running kind of at a steep angle here. Okay, so this would be an axis line for 2 pieces of fruit. We can start, if you, it would really matter which of these you started with initially. Well, let's start with a forward fruit here, the forward piece. Top of this fruit, if you put another axis line in, is about 2/3 of the way up. So the top of this piece of fruit is somewhere up in here. Maybe in a little bit more, but it's somewhere in here. To start this drawing, we're going to find the top of it with a small ellipse. And then we know the bottom of it's down here, and this is going to help us with our relative proportion. This is a large piece of fruit, makes contact with that first axis line, heads back up, and we'll play with this until we get it where we want it. Contours. Just kind of sketching right now. We're going to leave that, we're going to leave this ellipse in it for the moment. It kind of flattens out here. Flattens out a little bit there. Tends to dip in some right in there. And this will give us our first piece of fruit here, which is this pear. And it has the stem running out to the left at an angle. So this is a large, large piece of fruit in the composition here. Probably makes sense to drop back in behind this one, this forward piece of fruit now. And we'll start that with an ellipse. And this ellipse is larger. That's the face of this apple. And it drops down off of it and folds in behind that forward piece of fruit. Another small ellipse where the stem is coming out of it. Stem. So now we have some space in this thing, you know, from the overlapping shapes, you know, one shape in front of the other. All right, over to this one. I'll start this one with the ellipse as well. It's going to start up a little above the axis line that we have in here. It's pretty close to the edge. Ellipse makes contact with that first axis line. Seems to flatten out just a little bit right here. Angles back up. Does not make contact with this piece of fruit over here, so it stops short of that. And then we can kind of clean this up a little bit. I'm drawing pretty hard. You don't have to draw quite this hard because I want you to, be able to see what I'm doing on the screen. We'll put a second ellipse in here and draw the stem out of it. Okay, we'll pull this down a little bit. We'll put in a few ideas for our drapery here. It's going to stop short of going all the way up to the top of the picture plane, so, it's something like that, dropping down. We're going to use a device for this later, so it's not so important that you get this precise, as long as it kind of has some hills and valleys in it back there, it'll work out. And then it kind of drops off the edge of the picture plane over there. All right. There's a bit of a strong crease right here between these two pieces of fruit. I think it makes sense maybe to put that in there. That crease drops out again over here. We don't really need this axis line anymore. I don't know if I can get rid of it entirely, but I'm going to try to. Pretty good. And I'm going to go in and clean up a few edges some. If you have a standard little pencil like this one, that you get at the dollar store or somewhere, and it has that pink eraser on it, that's the best eraser for erasing on a canvas that there is. It takes a hard eraser to erase on a canvas. We don't need this axis line out here anymore. And I'm presently just kind of cleaning up my edges a little bit. I'm not taking out my, these ellipses, even though it's not something you actually see in the fruit, but I'm leaving them in because it's going to be a helpful guide in the painting process. So I'm going to leave them in there. Looks pretty good for the drawing process, I think. No pointing us drawing these things. We can just paint them in linearly with flat brush. We'll make lines in the white cloth flat brush. So we're not painting that in. Mixing paint. We're going to use some black. Burnt sienna, white. I'm going to put white out in two places. I'll always do that, but this is very important. In the event that we decide to make one of these pieces of fruit, or we decide to involve a little yellow in one of these pieces of fruit here, the black that we use in this underpainting cannot be the black that came directly out of the tube because it's too cold, meaning that what it will do to yellow underneath the yellow, the glaze of yellow underneath, it will turn it green when you are actually wanting to see it be yellow. So in order to avoid that, this black has to be warmer. It comes out of the tube cold. Black's a cold color. But in order for this to work out well, this black has to be pretty warm. So we're going to take black over to the burnt sienna. So we're introducing, the deeper color to the lighter color. We'll mix these in really well. We want this to be almost black, but a warm black, a reddish black. A little more, because it's got to go down to almost a black. Underpainting will be kind of warm. Your combination here is more burnt sienna than black, okay? This black's has a really strong tinting strength, so I had a larger pool of burnt sienna out than black initially. Alright, that looks like a pretty nice warm black. As always, it makes sense to use the largest brush that you can use for as long as you can reasonably use it. I've got to back up a moment here. I left this off early. I'm working on that smaller canvas that I gave you, the smaller work. It doesn't matter which which canvas you use, but this is the smaller canvas. I'll note that in the instructions, okay, since I left it off of the video, but I didn't want to devote a whole lot of time to this Venetian Mode painting. It's a little bit tedious. So. Right, we're going to start this painting in the darker areas of these pieces of fruit. Let's start over here with this one, the apple in the background here, and what we're going to work from is the darker area to the lighter area. So we're working dark to light. Same process you always use in painting. So now we're picking up a little of the absolute, warm black that we mixed up over here. And we're painting in, and you do have to be careful about your edges because this is your only opportunity to have these edges exactly where you want them. So I want to work with a large brush, but also I want to work accurately with my contours. Back to the palette for a little more paint. And look, if you find this is about comfortable, what's comfortable for you, if you find that you can't control this larger brush along those contours, then switch over to the smaller brush or even the point. key here is to keep it in control. I think I will switch to the other flap. Alright, as we move from our darkest darks here into our lighter areas, we'll begin to introduce a little bit of white into the black, warm black mixture. And this will be our middle ground in here. So painting right up to that edge of black. We got a middle ground going in now. Clean up that contour back there a little bit. You can't work really slowly with this, okay, because you got a drying time issue, and we don't want that to dry in the time it takes us to put this middle ground in. Alright, with the brush now, it's got this middle ground loaded on. I'm not rinsing it. I'm just going to get the excess paint out of it. And then I want to blend these two together. So I'm there in the place where these two came together, and I'm kind of sweeping them so that I blend them. As the Renaissance painters looked for soft passages from light to dark very often. And so we want that soft passage from dark to middle ground light. Now we're going to step up again, a little lighter. But it won't be an absolute white, okay? It'll be just off of the absolute white. And we're going into where the light is hitting this apple, which is on its face. We're working right in here now. Controlling that edge, that contour. And then, again, excess paint out of the brush. And blending right here on that edge where those two came together so that it's soft. Passages from dark to light, to lighter to even lighter. Each passage is a soft passage. Alright, where we have even more light hitting the form right here and right there, I'm just going to go into some straight white this time. Notice I have never rinsed this brush. Right up in there for the stronger light. We've got some pretty strong light right in here, right in that core. Maybe this wraps around a little bit more. Strengthen it a little bit more. Okay, getting excess paint out of the brush once more. We're still going to be keeping these edges soft, so this requires a little finessing, okay? Just touching it lightly so that we try to soften all these edges. Everything is going to be a soft passage. Alright, we'll have to switch over to the point at this stage, the point brush. As we need some control here, we're going to have to darken in this core of this apple, and I'm going straight into a little bit of just straight up dark, because it's a pretty dark area. And it's darkest in the top. So put in the darks here. I'm ignoring that core for the stem right at the moment. And we'll sweep out a little bit over here. This is a strong edge. You can leave it. You don't have to blend that, but over here we need a little blending out. And now I'll take some straight out dark warm black and pull the core out, not worrying about the highlight in it at this moment. So we'll pull the core out. And that'll take care of that apple. Same process each time for these other two pieces of fruit. So we're going to start out with absolute dark warm black, and our light each time is coming from the right to the left at an angle like this, so we know that this side of the fruit's light and the left hand side of the fruit each time is going to be the darkest. So we're working over here on the dark side of the fruit. And we want to control that edge again, that contour. And it is pretty much dark all the way up there. Pull it out some, away from the edge. I have that smaller brush here. It's just going to be easier for me to control out there on the contour. And this dark area moves on up into the center of this piece of fruit here. So we're going to move it on out. A little bit of light gets in here, so I'm leaving that for the moment. And there's our deepest, darkest area of that piece of fruit. Again, I didn't rinse the brush, okay? Don't rinse the brush, don't need to. We go into a middle value. And same thing as we did with the last piece of fruit, we're going to be over here with the middle value. We haven't hit our lightest lights in this thing yet. Control the edge. Staying with our middle value here. Middle value makes up a large portion of this in the center. And then we need to get rid of this hard edge. So we're sweeping between them again, very, very lightly. Pulling that wet paint against wet paint. Finesse. So that we have soft passages. We're looking for soft passages. We don't want a hard edge in this anywhere. Alright, now we're going to step the light up one more time over here for this area. So I'm back into white and stepping up again. It won't be an absolute white, almost be white, but and we're going up, that's not wide enough. So we're going up again, lighter. When I get to this last apple, I'm going to intentionally do something wrong, just in case you make some mistakes. What do you do about it? You can do some correction in this, but not an easy thing to do. Alright, getting rid of the excess paint in the brush again, so that I can get rid of this hard edge. Alright, so we want to soften that edge, sweeping in between those two planes of paint that come together. This is the most difficult aspect of this, is this sort of finessing the edge. Attempting to keep that soft with acrylic paints, difficult thing. Okay, so keeping things very soft. We need to step up one more time. This time I'm just into some pure white. I haven't rinsed the brush, however, so there's probably a little bit of this other stuff in it, and we'll go up one more time out here on this edge. Take it up one more time in a place or two. Maybe down some. And it looks like we have some very strong light hitting it right in there. And actually, that's such a strong highlight, we can leave it unarticulated, I believe. I don't know, maybe we should soften it some. Anyway, a little stronger light out here. Excess paint out of the brush. A little bit of finessing on that edge. Switch it over to the point again, point brush. This, we need a little bit of cavity right in here, and then the stem. So we're going straight into the dark stuff, and we'll drop drop a little bit of that cavity in. Small cavity this time. And then the dark for the stem. Okay, in this case, we have a cast shadow out away from the stem. So we already have a dark in here. We'll just lighten it a little bit. You know, we've got, let's lighten it up a little bit, have sort of a medium dark thing. And we'll drop that cast shadow out off of the stem. And that'll pretty much take care of the pear. So let's go back into the piece of fruit that's in the background there. Starting again with our darkest darks. Darkest darks in here are going to be right in there, and over here, and in the core. Into the pure stuff again. And we're going to have to be careful about this edge here. This is our opportunity to clean it up a little bit. And we'll have to be careful about this edge out here. And we're carving out around this forward piece of fruit. And this is your opportunity to kind of carve out that contour of the piece of fruit that's in front of the one that's in the background. So you can, if it were a little messy, you can clean it up some now. A little bit of it showing right in there. I don't know if I can do that with a point or not. With a square. Yeah, that's good now. Alright, now we're going into some middle ground. So a little white added into that mixture, so we've got a middle value. It's a relatively deep piece of fruit in the background. Dark red apple. Which it will be eventually when we do that. When we start glazing, it'll turn out red. Excess paint out of the brush. Pulling those two together. Okay, what if you're working more slowly than I'm working, which you may be, and you're starting to get drying in your darks and your middle values before you can get them pulled together like that? Then just go back and add some more paint to it so you know that it's wet again. Wet again, you know. And excess brush out, excess paint out of it, and you know, start doing the sweeping again so that you know this is pretty forgivable. You can keep going back into this stuff and until you get these softer edges. Now, let's say that you just cannot get the hang of the finesse. You can just take a wadded up piece of paper towel with, the end, something you can control, and push into the two areas, between the two areas. But the paint has to be wet there. Has to be wetter light paint, wetter dark paint. And you can push into them and get a soft blend that way. That's a possibility everywhere. Let's go back over to this one and say, well, man, I just can't get the hang of this finessing of the brush. And say you got some wet dark paint, got some wet middle value paint, and they're right next to one another. Right now we got a hard edge right there, and you just can't get the hang of the finesse. And wad up a piece of paper towel, go in there between those two, and just keep tamping until you smooth the two out. Alright, that's doubtful that the Renaissance artist did this, but you can do that. Alright, it's in the end, it's the painting that counts. So no one's going to go back and watch the video of you making the painting, because you're not going to film yourself, I hope. Okay, let's go up one more stage here, a little lighter, up in the top of this background piece of fruit. Most likely that's too dry for me to get these two to blend together. I might have to go back and put some more paint in there to get my blend. But we'll see. I'm going to take it out of the brush. I'm going to stay traditional with this because I'm supposed to be trying to stay traditional with you. So finessing on that edge here. It's working out alright. If I couldn't do it, I would not hesitate, even me, to go to a device. This would be a device, to tamp that in. Right. I'm going to stay with the brush, but if you can't make it happen, don't hesitate to try something else. In the end, it's the painting that counts. It's not how you cheated. If you figure out how to cheat at painting, I'd like to know, because there's just no possibility of doing it. Alright, I gotta shift over to the point brush, okay? So, as we've got to get that core of the apple in, so we're going back into the darks here. And we'll get the core in. And because of the way this apple is facing, we're using middle value again, not quite the whole dark. We're going to pull out away from the core a little bit with the point. Pulling out away from it. So you're starting in the core, pull out, pull out, pull out, pull out. My core has kind of lost a little bit of this darkness. I'm going to put a little bit more in, right in there. Got a little bit shallow on me, so. Yeah. And then we'll paint the stem in again, just with the dark. And we have our 3 pieces of fruit worked in. Finishing this painting is really easy. You're just taking a single color with some acrylic medium that I gave you in that little vial and painting flatly over it, because all of your darks and your middle grounds and your highlights are already in the painting at that point. So, you know, it's kind of fun seeing how it goes in the end. Let's go back to the big brush, and we're going to paint behind the we're painting behind the drapery now back in here, and I think that adds some drama to this painting. So just, you know, somewhat control that edge of the drapery and paint it out flatly up there with the dark. And I'm going to have to be careful right there with the edge of that apple and the edge of that drapery, and then paint out flatly. Messed up my drapery. So, you know, a little careful along the edge of this apple here. Trying to keep control of that edge. Drapery back over there. And then paint out flatly up here. Alright, we got the rest of this drapery, so I'm just painting up to the edge of it and wrapping around here. And paint it out. I'm going to end up with a monochromatic painting here in just a few minutes. Alright. Now, something a little unusual with this, we're going to paint in some of this, just the shadows areas in here, okay, in the drapery. And we'll be using the paint, because we're working on a dry canvas, doesn't have anything on it. We're just going to thin it out so that it's semi-transparent with some water. We want a semi-transparent wash, really, is what this is going to be. Yeah, it's not pure black, it's got a little bit of white in it, but it's a wash. You can see how wet it is. And then we'll work right back in here, because it'd be nice if this were darker than that. So we're going to kind of wash in a little bit right in here. I don't think I'm going to go all the way out to the edge there. I'm just going to leave it as a opportunity to kind of redefine this apple here some. Let it wash out that way. And this is casting the shadow down this way, so we're going to wash back this way some. Sort of narrowing as it comes down. There's shadow area in here. A little bit of shadow area right along this edge, so let's do that. that's high enough on it. Okay, we got shadowed areas back over here. We'll alter these just a little bit in a minute or two, but right now we're just going for kind of a wet, middle shadow looking stuff. Shadow right there, a little bit of light right in there. We're going to leave a little bit of light right there too, just because we can. I think it'll look good. Let's deepen just a little. So we're going back into some darks, not quite as much water in it this time. Right underneath, not dark enough. Right underneath the fruit, where it hits the table, we'll make it a little bit darker. Right underneath the fruit, a little bit darker. Right underneath the fruit, a little bit darker. Try not to paint over everything I've already put in, so I want to leave some of it, you know. A little bit darker there. And we have a few little dark areas like right there. Kind of curling dark area right in here. Alright, we could go in and soften this some. This seems like the simplest thing to do right now, especially since this is all drapery. So I'm going to just soften it. I'm not going to get too worried about stuff like that, okay? The irregularity of my edges, will be alright. Okay, any little bit of cleaning up that we need to do, and when I say that, I mean, I'm talking about edges of things. That's a rough edge right there. I'm just going to use some pure white, clean that up some. I don't want to scare you about this, but how well this black and white turns out is how well the painting turns out. So we'll clean some things up. The entire painting will be determined by how well this looks. I don't like that. And we'll clean that up a little bit. Maybe that. Maybe that. In your video, this looks really high light, but it's not quite high enough light. I'm going to add a little bit more light in here. So right now is the opportunity to go through here and do any little bit of adjustment that we need to do. Little highlight right there. Also a little highlight right in here. And there's a little bit stronger highlight right there, right there. Maybe a little more right in there. I'll soften those a little bit, so I'm going to get rid of the paints in the brush and soften the edges just a little. Okay, that's the underpainting stage of this painting. All right, and this this painting will be done in 2 videos. So there's this first video, which is the underpainting. This is referred to as a grisaille. Which means just basically grayscale. All right, so it's grayscale painting. And once this is fully dry, then our next stage in this will go like that. I mean, it's really fast because it's like painting a wall in a house. Just paint that one color, that one color, that one color, and all your darks and your middle values and lights will come through. But this has to dry for a minimum of 3 hours. If this is not dry is one thing. I can touch this and say, well, it's dry, it's not coming off on my finger. That, that doesn't mean that it's cured. It's not fully cured. And if it's not fully cured and we start using a glaze in it, it will pick this up and muddy up the glaze. So, don't fly through this, do this grisaille, and then immediately launch into the second video, which is the glazing process. There has to be 3 hours in between those two. So you have to let this rest for 3 hours before you start the second phase of this paint, well, the final phase of this painting. All right, good luck with this. I hope it works out well for you. And now you know what Michelangelo and Da Vinci went through for everything they did.